Get ready, because this story is the definition of the long game. For years, everyone in the underworld whispered about the loyal, gorgeous powerhouse of a woman who stayed by the side of the city's most feared and paralyzed Mafia Don. She saw the side of him no one else did, wiping away the grit of his former life while keeping his empire steady. But before we step into the underworld, do me a huge favor, hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. It helps our family grow and ensure you never miss a new release. I want this comment section to be buzzing today. Tell me in the comments, where in the world are you tuning in from? And while you're listening, timestamp your favorite parts. If a scene makes you laugh or swoon, let me know right when it happens. Are you ready? Let's get into the story. The gun was pointed at Amara's head, and all she could think was, I should have stayed in Lagos. Tell me why I shouldn't paint these very expensive walls with your very loud opinions, the man holding the gun said, his Korean accent wrapped around English words like barbed wire around silk. Amara raised her hands slowly, the blood pressure cuff still dangling from her wrist like the world's most useless bracelet. Because, she said, forcing her voice steady despite her heart attempting to break through her ribcage like the Kool-Aid man, your father needs his medication in exactly 8 minutes. And I'm the only one who knows which of these 20 identical white pills will keep him alive versus the ones that will give him explosive diarrhea. Your choice. The man's eyes, dark and sharp as obsidian knives, flickered with something between rage and grudging respect. The gun didn't lower. Ji-hoon, Daejung's grunt cut through the tension like a chainsaw through butter. 2 blinks. The universal sign for don't be an idiot. This was not how Amara had imagined meeting the prodigal son. 48 hours earlier. The morning Minseo delivered the news, Amara had been elbow-deep in what she professionally termed rich people problems, specifically trying to convince Dae-young that his solid gold bedpan was not, in fact, a symbol of his enduring power, but rather a urinary tract infection waiting to happen. Mr. Kim, I don't care if it was a gift from a Yakuza boss. Gold is non-porous, yes, but it's also conducting heat in ways that your dignity cannot afford. He's coming back. Amara froze, thermometer halfway to Daejung's ear. Minseo stood in the doorway like an elegantly dressed harbinger of doom, her Chanel suit probably worth more than Amara's entire nursing degree. Who's coming back? Jesus? Because that's about the only person who could make this household more dramatic. Minseo's expression didn't crack. The woman had a face that could make Mount Rushmore look expressive. Ji-hoon. Dae-young's son. He arrives tomorrow. The thermometer slipped from Amara's fingers and clattered against the marble floor, the expensive kind of clatter that suggested she'd just dropped something worth 3 months of her salary. Daejung's eyes widened. Not the normal widening. The oh god something is actually happening widening. His good hand, well, less paralyzed hand, twitched like it was trying to remember how to make a fist or possibly a rude gesture. Tomorrow. Amara's voice climbed an octave. As in, the day after today? That tomorrow. Is there another kind? Minseo adjusted her already perfect hair. Prepare the east wing. Make sure Dae-young is presentable. Presentable? The man communicates through blinks and aggressive eye contact. What exactly am I supposed to? But Minseo had already glided away, leaving behind the faint scent of expensive perfume and impending disaster. Amara turned to Dae-young, who was now blinking rapidly, not code, just what she'd learned to recognize as his version of a panic attack. Hey, she said softly, switching to the gentle voice she reserved for his worst moments. Breathe. Remember? In through the nose, out through the, okay, you're just staring at me now. That's fine. Staring is good. Staring means you're not having a stroke. She pulled up a chair, her thick frame settling into it with the comfortable ease of someone who'd stopped apologizing for taking up space around the same time she'd started working for a crime lord. Talk to me. Well, blink at me. Is this good news or call the lawyers news? 2 blinks. Yes. Then 1 blink. No. Then eye rolling that suggested the answer was it's complicated, which was Daejung's favorite emotional state. The truth was, Amara knew very little about Ji-hoon except what she'd pieced together from 5 years of overheard conversations and one very drunken confession from Min-seo during a particularly brutal anniversary of Dae-jung's shooting. Ji-hoon Kim had been the golden boy. Brilliant. Handsome. Destined to inherit an empire built on equal parts business acumen and strategic violence. But he'd wanted something Dae-jung couldn't give him, a way out. A normal life. A career that didn't require a lawyer on retainer and a cemetery plot picked out before your 30th birthday. The fight had been legendary. 7 years ago, Ji-hoon had walked out and Dae-jung had declared him dead to the family. Korean drama didn't have anything on the Kim family when it came to generational trauma and toxic masculinity wrapped in expensive suits. And now he was coming back. Why no? Amara asked. Dae-jung's forehead vein throbbed, the one that meant he was hiding something. Don't give me that look. I've wiped your ass for 5 years. You don't get to have secrets about family reunions that might result in me needing to update my resume. 3 blinks. Their code for "I'll explain later," which was Dae-jung speak for "I'm never explaining this. Stop asking." The next 24 hours passed in a blur of preparation that would have made a royal wedding look understated. The estate, already immaculate in that "we have people who clean" way, was polished to a shine that could probably be seen from space. Amara watched an army of staff members she rarely saw emerge from various corners of the mansion like well-dressed meerkats, wielding dusters and anxiety in equal measure. "Is it always like this?" she asked one of the housekeepers, a tiny woman named Yoon who sometimes snuck her extra kimchi. "Not since the young master left," Yoon whispered, glancing around like the walls had ears. Which, in this house, they probably did. Mr. Kim ordered everything perfect. Like before. Before the shooting. Before the betrayal. Before Dae-jung's world had collapsed into a wheelchair and a feeding tube and a thick black nurse from Lagos who'd seen too much and said too little. Amara spent the day alternating between managing Dae-jung's vital signs and managing his visible anxiety. He refused his lunch, never a good sign. Rejected his afternoon physical therapy, worse sign. And when she tried to get him to do his breathing exercises, he glared at her with such intensity that she'd actually checked to make sure he hadn't spontaneously developed laser vision. "You're being ridiculous," she told him while adjusting his collar for the 15th time. She'd dressed him in one of his expensive suits, the kind that probably cost more than a small car, and made him look like a Bond villain who'd fallen on hard times. "He's your son, not a firing squad." Dae-jung made a sound that suggested he wasn't entirely sure there was a difference. Evening arrived with the subtlety of a freight train. Amara stationed herself in Dae-jung's room, the master suite that overlooked the garden where nothing grew except expensive imported plants that required more maintenance than most relationships. Min-seo appeared at 7 o'clock sharp. "He's here." Amara's stomach dropped into her sensible nursing shoes. "Now, did you expect him to send a telegram first?" Min-seo raised one perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "Come." Dae-jung insists on greeting him in the main hall. Getting Dae-jung from bedroom to main hall involved a wheelchair, 2 staff members, Amara's best maneuvering skills, and a small prayer to whatever deity protected nurses from their own terrible life choices. They positioned him at the base of the grand staircase, because apparently, dramatic entrances were a family requirement. Amara stood to his right, close enough to monitor his vitals, but far enough to not intrude on what was clearly meant to be a moment with a capital M. The doors opened, and Ji-hoon Kim walked in like he owned the place, which, technically, he probably did or would, assuming Korean inheritance laws and crime family succession plans aligned. Amara's first thought, oh. Her second thought, oh no. Her third thought, I should have asked for hazard pay. Ji-hoon Kim was beautiful in the way that expensive problems usually were. Tall, lean, with the kind of face that belonged on magazine covers or most wanted posters, depending on the family business. He wore a tailored black suit that suggested Seoul fashion sense and American business school, his dark hair styled in that effortlessly perfect way that definitely took effort. But it was his eyes that caught her. Dark, intense, and currently fixed on his father with an expression that cycled through surprise, anger, grief, and something that might have been love if love came wrapped in barbed wire and abandonment issues. "Aboji," he said quietly. "Father." Daejong blinked rapidly. Amara had learned to recognize wetness in his eyes as distinct from his regular aggressive staring. This was the former. The moment stretched like taffy, thick and uncomfortable. Amara debated whether to leave, stay, or spontaneously combust to relieve the tension. Then Ji-hoon's eyes shifted to her. "And who," he said in English, his accent crisp and cutting, "is this?" Before Amara could answer, Dae-young made a sound, a grunt that she'd learned meant important, or possibly mine, depending on context. "I'm Amara," she said, straightening to her full height and meeting his gaze directly. Lagos had taught her never to shrink for anyone, even beautiful men with complicated family dynamics. "Your father's nurse." Something flickered in Ji-hoon's expression. "Nurse." "Yes, nurse. The person who's kept him alive for 5 years while you were," she caught herself. Not her business. Not her family. Not her drama. Away. The temperature in the room dropped about 15 degrees. "Ji-hoon." Minseo's voice cut through the tension. "Perhaps we should speak in the study. There are matters to discuss." "Matters," Ji-hoon repeated, still staring at Amara like she was a particularly confusing puzzle. "Yes. I'm sure there are many matters." He moved toward Daejong, and Amara instinctively stepped closer to her patient. Years of working in Lagos hospitals had given her excellent threat assessment skills, and something about Ji-hoon's energy set off all her alarm bells. But then Ji-hoon actually knelt, in front of his father's wheelchair, and when he spoke, his voice cracked with 5 years of unspoken words. "I'm sorry," he whispered in Korean. Amara understood enough to catch the meaning. "I'm so sorry." Daejong's good hand moved slowly, trembling, and touched his son's head. Amara looked away. Some moments were too private, even for the woman who'd wiped this man's tears and changed his bedpans. She'd give them 5 minutes, she decided. 5 minutes of family reunion before she had to intervene for Daejong's evening medication schedule. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that in 48 hours, that same son would be pointing a gun at her head. But that was the thing about working for a crime family. The heartwarming moments never lasted nearly long enough. Chapter 2: Family Secrets. The first 24 hours of Ji-hoon's return passed in a careful dance of avoidance, politeness, and the kind of tension that could probably be weaponized if properly harnessed. Amara maintained her routine with Daejong, but now every task came with an audience. Ji-hoon had taken up residence in the East Wing, the one Minseo had prepared, but spent most of his time hovering around his father's quarters like a very expensive, very well-dressed ghost. "Your son is staring at me again," Amara muttered while checking Daejong's blood pressure. "It's like being observed by a very judgmental falcon." Daejong's eye roll suggested this was somehow her problem to solve. "I'm just saying, if he has questions about your care, he can ask instead of lurking in doorways like he's auditioning for a vampire movie." As if summoned by the mere mention of his lurking, Ji-hoon appeared in the doorway. Amara didn't even turn around. "The doorway is occupied," she said cheerfully. "Try the window." "I hear dramatic entrances run in the family. I need to speak with my father." His English was perfect, too perfect, the kind that came from international schools and deliberate distance from one's roots. "Alone. Your father needs his medication in 10 minutes, his physical therapy in 30, and absolutely does not need stress that will spike his blood pressure. So you can speak with him after I'm done, or you can speak with him while I'm here pretending not to listen. Those are your options." She heard him move closer. The man walked like a cat, silent and probably planning something. "You're very direct." "I'm a nurse." Direct is in the job description, right between compassionate and will fight you about medication schedules. She finished with the blood pressure cuff and finally turned to face him. 138/85. Elevated. "Probably because you're stressing him out." Ji-hoon's jaw tightened. He had his father's pride, Amara noticed. The same stubborn set to his shoulders that Dae-young got when he was about to do something inadvisable. "I'm not stressing him out. I'm trying to understand what happened to him." What happened to him is in his medical file, which you're welcome to read if you can get past the HIPAA violations. Amara moved to prepare Daejeong's evening pills. Gunshot wound to the spine. C6, C7 vertebrae. Incomplete spinal cord injury. Prognosis: paralysis below the chest, limited arm mobility, dependent on care for most daily activities. The clinical words hung in the air like accusations. Who shot him? Amara's hands stilled for just a fraction of a second, not long enough for most people to notice, but Ji-hoon's eyes sharpened like he'd caught the tell. That's not a medical question, she said carefully. That's a police question. Or in your family's case, probably a handle-it-internally question. You were here. That first night. It wasn't a question. Amara met his gaze, her face carefully neutral. 5 years of practice keeping her mouth shut had taught her how to wear a mask as effectively as any of the dangerous men who walked these halls. I was hired to save his life. I saved his life. Everything else is family business, and I'm just the help. Just the help, Ji-hoon repeated slowly, who my father blinks at like you're the only person in the world who matters. Before Amara could respond to that particularly uncomfortable observation, Daejeong made a sound, the warning grunt that meant enough. Ji-hoon's expression shifted. Whatever else he was, Amara realized, he still knew how to read his father. Fine, he said. But we will talk. Soon. He left, and Amara released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Your son is intense, she told Daejeong. Where was he for 7 years? Brooding Academy. 2 blinks. Yes. Followed by eye-rolling that suggested Amara was being unfair, which she absolutely was, but caring for Daejeong for 5 years had earned her the right to be unfair about his emotionally complicated offspring. The real confrontation came 3 days later, in the worst possible way. Amara had fallen into an uneasy rhythm with Ji-hoon's presence. He'd wake early, spend an hour in what she assumed was some kind of meditation or possibly just staring broodingly at walls, then join his father for breakfast. Amara would facilitate the meal, cutting food, adjusting tubes, pretending she couldn't hear the awkward, stilted conversations between 2 proud men who'd forgotten how to talk to each other. Then Ji-hoon would disappear into meetings with Min Seo and various other organization members. Amara tried not to think too hard about what those meetings entailed. Her job was keeping Daejeong alive, not auditing the family's probably illegal business dealings. But on the 3rd night, she woke to sounds from Daejeong's room. Her bedroom was adjacent to his, close enough to hear if he needed help, far enough to maintain some semblance of privacy. She'd learned to distinguish his sounds, breathing troubles, nightmares, or the occasional knock something over while trying to assert independence incident. This was different. Voices. Multiple voices. Amara grabbed her robe and crossed the hallway in her bare feet. The door to Daejeong's suite was slightly ajar, light spilling out like a warning. Can't keep protecting him, Ji-hoon's voice, tight with frustration. Park Sang-woo has been running the organization into the ground. The territory we've lost, the deals that have fallen through. A grunt from Daejeong. Angry. Yes, I know you trust him. You trusted him 5 years ago too, and look where that got you. Amara's blood went cold. She pushed the door open. Ji-hoon was leaning over his father's bed, close enough that it looked aggressive. Daejeong's eyes were wide, his face flushed, never a good sign. Step back, Amara said, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. Now. Ji-hoon straightened, turning to face her. This is a private conversation. This is a medical situation. Your father's blood pressure is probably through the roof, his stress levels are spiking, and you're hovering over him like, she moved between them, checking Daejeong's pulse. Racing. Like someone who wants him to have another stroke. Is that what you want? Don't be ridiculous. Then. Step. Back. They stared at each other, and Amara saw it, the moment Ji-hoon realized she wasn't going to budge. Whatever authority he thought he had, whatever power came with being the prodigal son, it stopped at the edge of his father's medical care. He stepped back. Amara turned her attention to Daejeong, her hands gentle as she checked his vitals. Breathe, she murmured. Come on, boss. Show your son that breathing thing I taught you. Slowly, Daejeong's breathing evened out. His eyes met hers, and she saw gratitude mixed with something else. Fear, maybe? Or recognition that things were about to get much worse. Out, she told Ji-hoon. We'll discuss visiting hours in the morning. I'm his son, and I'm the person who decides whether he lives or dies on a daily basis. Out. Now. For a moment, she thought he might refuse. Then something shifted in his expression, respect, maybe, or just exhaustion. He nodded once and left. Amara waited until his footsteps faded before sinking into the chair beside Daejung's bed. That was stupid, she told him. Whatever he was saying about Park Sang-woo, you need to tell him to handle it during reasonable hours, not. She caught the look in Daejung's eyes. What? 3 blinks. I need to tell you something. Can it wait until morning? Because my heart rate is still recovering from playing referee between you two. Negative. 1 blink. Amara sighed and pulled her chair closer. Fine. But this better be good, because I was having an excellent dream about jollof rice. Daejung's good hand moved slowly toward the nightstand. Amara opened the drawer and pulled out the tablet they used for communication, one of Minseo's innovations, loaded with a program that let him type with limited hand mobility. His finger moved across the screen with painstaking slowness. Park Sang-woo must not know Jae-hoon suspects. Amara's stomach dropped. Suspects what? Betrayal. The word sat on the screen like a confession. Like a grenade with the pin pulled. Mr. Kim, Amara said carefully, are you telling me that Park Sang-woo is the one who? She couldn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Daejung's eyes said everything. And Ji-hoon figured this out. 2 blinks. Yes. But Park doesn't know that Ji-hoon knows. Yes. And you're worried that if Park finds out. Daejung's finger moved again. He will kill him. Amara's mind raced. 5 years. 5 years she'd been sitting on the secret, and now it turned out she wasn't the only one who knew. Worse, Ji-hoon was apparently conducting his own investigation, and Park Sang-woo, the man who smiled at her with dead eyes and ran most of the Kim organization, was wandering around this house like a wolf in an Armani suit. Why didn't you tell Ji-hoon to back off? He won't listen. Stubborn pride runs in the family. Shocking. She ran a hand over her face. Mr. Kim, this is so far above my pay grade. I'm a nurse. I keep you alive. I don't do whatever this is. But even as she said it, she knew it was a lie. She'd been involved the moment she'd seen Park Sang-woo walking away that first night. She'd been involved every day she'd kept her mouth shut. She'd been involved the moment she'd started caring about the irritable crime lord who'd become more than just a patient. What do you want me to do? She asked finally. Daejung's finger moved. Keep Jae-hoon alive. That's it? Just keep him alive? Any particular strategy, or should I just throw myself between him and the next bullet like a very unprepared meat shield? Watch Park. Watch Park, Amara repeated. The man who shot you and got away with it for 5 years. The man who currently controls most of your organization. That Park. 2 blinks. Apologetic, maybe, or just resigned. Amara stood, pacing the length of the bedroom. Through the window, she could see the garden, dark now, shadows moving in ways that suggested security guards or possibly just very aggressive shrubbery. I saw him, she said quietly. That night, I saw Park leaving after the shooting. Daejung's eyes widened. I never told anyone because I'm not an idiot. But I saw him. And I've spent 5 years pretending I didn't because she turned back to face him. Because you needed me and I figured one day you'd deal with it. But you never did. Couldn't. Yeah, well, now your son is dealing with it and apparently that's going to get everyone killed. She moved back to his bedside. You really know how to throw a family reunion, Mr. Kim. Despite everything, Daejung's mouth twitched the closest he could get to a smile these days. Don't try to be charming. It doesn't work when you're asking me to commit espionage against a crime lord. She checked his vitals one more time. Fine. I'll watch Park. I'll try to keep your son from getting himself killed. But I want a raise. 2 enthusiastic blinks. And hazard pay. More blinking. And if I die, you're personally explaining to my mother why her daughter's funeral is being held in Korea instead of Lagos. 1 blink. Deal. Amara pulled his blankets up and adjusted his pillow. Get some sleep. Tomorrow I'm going to have to figure out how to babysit a grown man with a vendetta while also keeping you from having a stress-induced heart attack. My to-do list is getting complicated. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. Mr. Kim? Why now? Why did Ji-hoon come back now? Daejeong's expression shifted, something sad and proud at once. His finger moved on the tablet. I called him. Dying. Amara's breath caught. You're not dying. Everyone dies. Wanted to see him first. You manipulative old man, she said, but her voice cracked. You're not allowed to die. I forbid it. Doctor's orders. One blink. No promises. Well, try not to anyway. At least not until after we've dealt with the whole betrayal and murder situation. One crisis at a time. She closed the door and stood in the hallway, her back against the wall, her heart pounding. 5 years of secrets. 5 years of silence. And now everything was unraveling like cheap thread. The worst part? She had a feeling the unraveling had only just begun. Chapter 3: The Investigation. The next morning arrived with all the subtlety of a hangover. Amara had slept maybe 3 hours, her dreams filled with bullets and betrayals and Ji-hoon's intense eyes staring at her like she was a puzzle he needed to solve before it killed someone. She was preparing Daejeong's breakfast, a delicate balance of nutrients, medications, and textures he could actually swallow without assistance, when Ji-hoon appeared in the kitchen doorway. We need to talk, he said. Good morning to you too. Coffee's on the counter. Help yourself to the existential dread. It's free with every cup. He didn't smile. Of course he didn't. Amara was starting to suspect the Kim men had their sense of humor surgically removed at birth. I meant what I said. We need to talk. About Park Sang-woo. Amara's hand stilled on the spoon she'd been using to measure out medicine. And I meant what I said about keeping your father's stress levels down. Whatever you're planning. I'm not planning anything. He moved into the kitchen, and she noticed for the first time how tired he looked. Dark circles under his eyes. A tightness around his mouth that spoke of sleepless nights. I'm trying to find the truth. The truth about what? About who shot my father. Amara turned back to her breakfast preparations, buying herself time. I thought that was old news. 5 years old, in fact. It is. And it's also the reason I came back. He poured himself coffee with the careful precision of someone used to controlling every movement. My father called me a month ago. First time in 7 years. He couldn't speak well enough to say much, but he sent me files. Evidence. Documentation of deals that went wrong, money that went missing, operations that failed right after Park was put in charge. That's circumstantial. It's a pattern. Ji-hoon's voice hardened. And I've spent the last month building a case. But I need more. He stopped, studying her face. You were here that night. I've been here lots of nights. The night he was shot. You were the first medical personnel on scene. Amara met his gaze, her face carefully neutral. Yes. What did you see? I saw a man who'd been shot. I saw blood. She caught herself before saying too much. I saw a job that needed doing, so I did it. Did you see Park Sang-woo? The question hung between them like a blade. Amara thought about lying. Thought about deflecting. Thought about the 5 years she'd spent keeping this secret locked behind her teeth. Then she thought about Daejeong's words, keep Ji-hoon alive. Why are you asking me questions you already know the answer to? Something flickered in Ji-hoon's expression. So you did see him. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. He set his coffee down, and Amara noticed his hands were shaking slightly. Rage, she realized. Carefully controlled rage. He killed my father. Or tried to. And then he took over the organization like it was always meant to be his. Your father isn't dead. He's not alive either. Not really. Not the way he was. Ji-hoon's voice cracked. Do you know what it's like? To get a call after 7 years of silence and hear your father, your proud, strong father, struggling to breathe well enough to say, come home. Amara did know, actually. She'd gotten a similar call from Lagos 3 months before taking this job. Her mother's doctor, explaining in careful tones about kidney disease and transplant lists and astronomical costs that made her nursing salary look like pocket change. I know what it's like to feel helpless, she said quietly. But revenge. This isn't revenge. It's justice. In your family's world, is there a difference? The question seemed to surprise him. He studied her for a long moment, and Amara had the uncomfortable sensation of being x-rayed by someone who knew exactly what bones to look for. You're not what I expected, he said finally. Was I supposed to be? I wasn't informed there were expectations. My father's nurse. I expected someone, older. More intimidated. Less, he gestured vaguely. You. Less black? Less Nigerian? Less thick. Amara raised an eyebrow. I'm used to exceeding expectations. Comes with the territory. Less willing to challenge me. Oh, that. She finished plating Daejong's breakfast. Well, someone has to. Your father certainly won't. He can barely communicate beyond aggressive blinking. Minseo is too busy running damage control. And you, she fixed him with a look. You're so busy playing detective that you've forgotten your father needs family, not a case file. Direct hit. She could tell by the way Ji-hoon's jaw tightened. I'm trying to give him justice. He wants his son. Amara picked up the breakfast tray. Justice is great and all, but it won't keep him company during his 2 a.m. breathing treatments or make him laugh during his physical therapy sessions, which, by the way, he needs to start doing with you instead of fighting me the whole time. Why would he do physical therapy with me? Because you're his son. And maybe if you spent less time investigating and more time just being here, she stopped, suddenly aware she'd said too much. Never mind. Not my business. No, finish. Ji-hoon moved to block her path. He'd what? Amara sighed. He'd heal. Maybe not physically, the spinal damage is pretty permanent. But the other stuff. The grief. The pride. The 7 years of missing you. She met his eyes. That's the kind of wound I can't treat with medication. For a moment, Ji-hoon looked young. Uncertain. Like the scared son who'd walked away 7 years ago instead of the hardened investigator who'd walked back in. I don't know how, he admitted. To just be here. With him. Like this. Nobody does. But you show up anyway. That's how it works. Is that what you do? Just show up. Every day. Multiple times a day. Usually when he's being particularly stubborn about something. She softened slightly. Look, I get it. This is hard. He's not the father you remember. But he's still your father. And he called you back for a reason. He called me back because Park is getting bold. The organization is fracturing. There are rumors of Ji-hoon stopped himself. I can't talk about this with you. Because I'm just the nurse. Because I don't want you involved in something that could get you killed. The words landed like stones. Amara thought about Daejong's request. About the secret she'd been carrying for 5 years. About the fact that she was already involved, had been involved from the moment she'd witnessed Park walking away. Too late, she said. I'm already involved. Have been for 5 years. Because you work for my father. Because I saw Park Sang-woo leave the estate the night your father was shot. While everyone else was running toward the gunfire, he was walking away. Calm. Collected. Like he'd just finished a business meeting instead of, she cut herself off, aware of how much she was revealing. So yes, I'm involved. Whether I like it or not. Ji-hoon stared at her like she'd just detonated a bomb in his carefully constructed case. You saw him. You can testify. Testify where? To whom? Your family doesn't exactly file police reports. Amara shifted the breakfast tray. Look, I don't know what you're planning, but leave me out of it. My job is keeping your father alive, not playing witness in whatever mob court you're planning to convene. But if you saw, I saw nothing. I know nothing. And if anyone asks, especially Park, you never had this conversation with me. She moved past him toward the door. Now if you'll excuse me, your father's oatmeal is getting cold, and he's cranky enough without adding temperature complaints to the list. She made it halfway down the hall before Ji-hoon called after her. Amara. She stopped but didn't turn around. Thank you. For keeping him alive. For, his voice softened. For being here when I wasn't. Amara's throat tightened. Just don't make me regret telling you what I saw. I like my job. I like being alive. I'd prefer to keep both. I'll protect you. She did turn then, meeting his eyes. The last person your father trusted to protect him put a bullet in his spine. So forgive me if I'm not reassured by promises from the Kim family. The words were harsh, but necessary. Ji-hoon needed to understand what 5 years in this house had taught her. Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford, not even for the prodigal son with his father's eyes and his dead mother's cheekbones. The real trouble started 3 days later. Park Sang-woo arrived for his weekly update with Daejong, as he'd done every week for the past 5 years. Amara had learned to time her schedule around these visits, present enough to monitor Daejong's vitals, distant enough to seem uninterested in the business discussions. But this time was different. This time, Ji-hoon was home. She was changing Daejong's 4 bag when Park arrived, Min-seo trailing behind him like a particularly elegant shadow. Park wore one of his perfect suits, probably Italian, definitely expensive, and his smile was warm as he greeted Daejong. Looking well, sir, Park said in Korean, his tone respectful. The new medication seems to be helping. Daejong grunted non-committally. Amara caught the tension in his jaw. And this must be the famous nurse. Park switched to English, his accent barely noticeable. Amara, yes? I've heard nothing but praise for your dedication. Just doing my job, Amara said, focusing on the 4-line. A job well done deserves recognition. Perhaps a bonus this quarter, Min-seo. Already arranged, Min-seo said coolly. The door opened and Ji-hoon walked in. The temperature in the room dropped instantly. Park Sang-woo, Ji-hoon said, his voice carefully neutral. It's been a while. Park's smile didn't waver, but Amara noticed his eyes, cold calculation behind the warmth. Ji-hoon SSI. Welcome home. We've missed you. I'm sure you have. The subtext was thick enough to cut with a knife. Amara glanced at Daejong, whose forehead vein was throbbing, never a good sign. Mr. Kim needs rest, she said, her tone brooking no argument. Perhaps these updates could continue later? Of course. Park bowed slightly to Daejong. I'll return tomorrow. Rest well, sir. He left, Min-seo following. But Ji-hoon stayed, staring after them with an expression that promised violence. Don't, Amara said quietly. Don't what? Whatever you're thinking. Don't. Ji-hoon's hands clenched into fists. He was here. In this room. Smiling at my father like he didn't. I know. She moved between Ji-hoon and the door, a physical barrier. But your father's blood pressure is already elevated, and if you go after Park right now, in this house, you'll start a war you're not prepared to fight. I'm prepared. You're angry. There's a difference. She held his gaze. I've worked in trauma units. I've seen what happens when people act on rage instead of planning. It doesn't end well. So, what do you suggest? I just let him. I suggest you breathe. Sit with your father. Talk to him about something other than revenge. She gestured to Daejong, who was watching the exchange with exhausted eyes. He needs you. Not the detective. Not the avenger. Just you. For a moment, she thought Ji-hoon might refuse. Then something in his expression crumbled, and he moved to his father's bedside, sinking into the chair like a puppet with cut strings. Aboji, he said quietly. I'm sorry. I'm trying to, his voice broke. I don't know what I'm doing. Daejong's good hand moved slowly, reaching for his son. Ji-hoon took it, and Amara watched as 2 proud men tried to bridge 7 years of silence through a simple touch. She slipped out of the room, giving them privacy. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall and tried to slow her racing heart. This was getting complicated. Too complicated. She was a nurse, not a bodyguard or a detective or whatever else the situation required. But as she stood there, she thought about Daejong's request. About keeping Ji-hoon alive. About the secret she'd carried for 5 years finally seeing daylight. And she realized, with a sinking feeling in her stomach, that complicated was just the beginning. Chapter 4. The Confrontation. The gun was pointed at her head, and Amara was really starting to regret every life choice that had led to this moment. Tell me why I shouldn't paint these very expensive walls with your very loud opinions, Ji-hoon said, his voice cold enough to freeze hell. Wait, no. That wasn't right. Let's rewind. Because the 48 hours between Park's visit and the gun currently aimed at Amara's forehead were when everything went spectacularly, catastrophically wrong. It started with Ji-hoon's investigation. Amara had noticed him spending more time in the estate's old office, Daejung's former command center, now gathering dust like a museum to better days. She'd catch glimpses of him through the half-open door, papers spread across the massive desk, laptop glowing, phone pressed to his ear having conversations in rapid Korean that sounded increasingly desperate. She tried to focus on her job. Daejung's morning routine, medication, breakfast, physical therapy that he fought her on with all the stubbornness of a man who'd once controlled an empire through sheer force of will. His afternoon schedule, more medication, lunch, the breathing exercises he hated, rest period where he'd glare at her for making him rest. But Ji-hoon's presence had changed the rhythm of the house. The staff whispered more. Min-seo's visits became more frequent. And Park Sang-woo started showing up at odd hours, always with an excuse, always with that smile that made Amara want to check that all the exits were still accessible. On the second day after Park's visit, Ji-hoon cornered her in the kitchen. "I need your help," he said without preamble. Amara was elbow-deep in preparing Daejung's specialized meals, a process that involved more precision than most people realized. "I'm busy. This is important. So is making sure your father doesn't aspirate his lunch." Ji-hoon moved into her line of sight, forcing her to acknowledge him. "Park is moving money. Large amounts. To offshore accounts. That sounds illegal. You should definitely not be telling the nurse about illegal things." Amara. "No." She set down the knife she'd been using to cut vegetables. "Whatever you're planning, leave me out of it. You said you saw him. That night." "I said a lot of things. I also said I wanted to stay out of it. But you're already in it." Ji-hoon's frustration was palpable. "Don't you understand? Park knows you were there. He's known for 5 years. The only reason you're still alive is because killing you would have raised too many questions." Amara's blood went cold. "That's speculation. It's fact. I've seen the security logs. Park accessed them the day after the shooting. He knows exactly who was in the house, where they were, what they saw." Ji-hoon leaned closer. "You think he doesn't know you saw him leave? Then why hasn't he?" She stopped herself. "Killed you? Because you were useful. You kept my father alive. Park needed that. Needed him alive, but powerless, unable to run the organization, but still enough of a figurehead that Park's takeover looked like loyalty instead of a coup." Ji-hoon's expression hardened. "But now I'm back. And Park knows I'm asking questions. Which means I'm a loose end." Amara's hands shook slightly as she resumed chopping vegetables. "Fantastic. My mother's going to be so disappointed when I die in a foreign country for a job I took because it paid well. I won't let anything happen to you. You can't promise that." "I can try." She looked at him, then really looked. At the exhaustion in his eyes. The weight he was carrying. The desperation of a son trying to save a father who was already broken. "What do you need from me?" she asked finally. Relief flooded Ji-hoon's face. "Park visits every week. Tomorrow is his next update meeting with my father. I need you to keep him there, in the room, for at least 30 minutes. Long enough for my people to access his office downtown. His office. To get the evidence I need. Account numbers. Communication logs. Proof of the betrayal. And you think he's just going to sit there while you rob him? He won't know. Not if you. Keep him distracted." Amara laughed, but it had no humor. "You're asking me to do a lot for someone I met a week ago. I'm asking you to help me get justice for my father. You're patient. The man you've kept alive for 5 years. Low blow, and they both knew it. But effective." "Fine," Amara said. 30 minutes. But after this, I'm done. No more investigations, no more secrets. I go back to being just the nurse." Ji-hoon nodded, but they both knew it was a lie. There was no going back. Not anymore. The next day arrived with storm clouds that seemed inappropriately symbolic. Park Sang-woo came at his usual time, 2 p.m., when Daejung was typically most alert. Amara had positioned herself in the room, ostensibly checking vitals, but really just trying not to hyperventilate at the thought of what Ji-hoon was doing across town. 30 minutes. She needed to keep Park here for 30 minutes. Mr. Kim's blood pressure has been elevated, she said, interrupting Park's discussion about shipping routes. I need to run some additional tests. Park's smile was polite, but his eyes were calculating. Of course. His health is our priority. She set up the blood pressure monitor with deliberate slowness, inflated the cuff, waited, deflated, frowned at the reading. Problem? Park asked. Maybe. I need to take it again. Sometimes the first reading is inaccurate. She repeated the process. Slower this time. Park was checking his phone, fingers moving across the screen with practiced ease. 15 minutes down. 15 to go. Mr. Kim, she said, I'm going to need to do a full cardiovascular assessment. Mr. Park, you might want to wait outside. This could take a while. I'll stay, Park said smoothly. I have nowhere else to be. Shit. Amara launched into the most thorough, unnecessarily detailed cardiovascular assessment she'd ever performed. She checked Daejong's pulse from multiple points, listened to his heart with exaggerated concentration, asked him to breathe in complicated patterns that made absolutely no medical sense but sounded impressive. Daejong, to his credit, played along. He could tell something was happening, even if he didn't know exactly what. 25 minutes. Park's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and Amara saw his expression change, subtle, but there. The smile stayed in place, but his eyes went cold. I need to make a call, he said. Excuse me. He stepped into the hallway, and Amara's heart sank. He knew. Somehow he knew. She looked at Daejong, whose eyes were wide with alarm. Without thinking, she pulled out her phone and texted Ji-hoon. Get out. Now. 30 seconds later, Park returned. His smile was gone. Where is Ji-hoon? He asked quietly. I don't know. Probably in his room. His room is empty. So is my office downtown, which is currently being accessed by someone with remarkably good timing. Park's hand moved to his jacket, toward what was almost certainly a gun. I'm going to ask you one more time. Where is Ji-hoon? The door burst open. Ji-hoon stood there, breathing hard, holding what looked like a tablet computer. I've got everything, he said. Every account. Every transaction. Every piece of evidence that proves you shot my father. Park's gun cleared his jacket with professional speed, but it didn't point at Ji-hoon. It pointed at Amara. Put the tablet down, Park said calmly. Or I kill the nurse. Which brought us to now. To the gun pointed at Amara's head. To Ji-hoon frozen in the doorway, tablet in hand. To Daejong making sounds that suggested he was either having a medical emergency or trying to communicate through sheer force of will. You don't want to do this, Ji-hoon said, his voice surprisingly steady. Security will be here in minutes. Your security or mine? Park's smile returned, empty and terrible. I've been running this organization for 5 years. The security answers to me. Not all of them. Enough of them. Park's gun didn't waver. The tablet, Ji-hoon. And then we'll discuss your future, or lack thereof, in the family business. Amara's mind raced. She'd seen Park walk away from one murder attempt. She had no illusions that he'd hesitate to follow through on this one. But then she noticed something. Daejong's good hand, moving slowly toward the call button clipped to his bed rail. The one that connected directly to Min-seo's office. She needed to buy time. You know, Amara said, her voice somehow not shaking despite the gun approximately 6 inches from her face. This is really poor medical practice. Guns in the patient's room. Very unsanitary. Probably violates at least 15 hospital protocols. Park's expression flickered surprise, maybe, that she was speaking at all. Also, she continued, terrible feng shui. All this negative energy can't be good for Mr. Kim's recovery. Shut up, Park said. I'm just saying, you're going to give him a stroke. And then I'll have to do CPR, which is really hard with a gun pointed at me. Have you considered the ergonomics of this situation? I said shut. The door behind Ji-hoon exploded inward. Min-seo stood there with 4 security guards, the ones who'd been loyal to Daejong since before Park's coup. Her face was carved from stone, but her gun was very steady as she pointed it at Park's head. Step away from the nurse, she said in Korean. For a moment, nobody moved. Mexican standoff, Korean edition. Then Park laughed, a sound like breaking glass. You think this changes anything? I have half the organization. I have the accounts. We have the evidence, Ji-hoon said, holding up the tablet. Every transaction. Every communication. Including the texts you sent to the shooter that night. The one who pulled the trigger for you while you established your alibi. Park's gun finally wavered. You have nothing. We have everything. Including a witness. Ji-hoon's eyes flicked to Amara. She saw you leave. That night, while everyone else was trying to save my father. Park's gun swung back to Amara, and she saw it in his eyes, the calculation that she was dead anyway, might as well. Minseo fired. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. Park's shoulder exploded in red, and his gun clattered to the floor. He dropped screaming, clutching the wound. Amara's ears rang. Her legs felt like jelly. But her nurse training kicked in automatically. Someone get me a first aid kit, she heard herself saying. And call an ambulance. Gunshot wound, right shoulder, arterial involvement. Let him bleed, Ji-hoon said coldly. I'm a nurse. Amara's voice was sharp. I don't let people bleed. Not even murderous crime lords who just pointed guns at my head. She moved toward Park, and Minseo's security guards parted for her. Park looked up, his face pale with shock and pain. Why? He gasped. Because I took an oath, Amara said, pressing gauze to the wound with more force than strictly necessary. Even if you're an asshole who tried to kill my patient. Behind her, she heard Dae-jung making sounds. She glanced back and saw tears streaming down his face, relief, maybe, or just the emotional overload of watching your son avenge you while your nurse provided medical care to your would-be murderer. Korean dramas had nothing on the Kim family. Chapter 5. The Aftermath. 3 weeks later, Amara was doing her best to pretend her life had returned to normal, which was hilarious considering normal now included regular visits from prosecutors, debriefings with Minseo, and the lingering memory of that gun pointed at her face. Park Sang-woo had survived. Amara's quick medical intervention had prevented him from bleeding out, which she alternately felt good and conflicted about. He was currently in prison, awaiting trial for attempted murder, embezzlement, and approximately 50 other charges that Ji-hoon's investigation had uncovered. Turned out, when you pointed a gun at the nurse of a crime lord's disabled father, you lost a lot of organizational support. Who knew? The house felt different now. Lighter, somehow, despite the increased security presence. Or maybe that was just Amara's imagination, filtered through the exhausted relief of still being alive. She was adjusting Dae-jung's physical therapy equipment when Ji-hoon found her. Can we talk? He asked. Those are becoming your favorite words. I'm starting to associate them with gunfire and existential crises. His mouth twitched, the closest thing to a smile she'd seen from him in weeks. Fair. But this time it's actually good news. Define good news. Because my definition has been significantly adjusted lately. Ji-hoon pulled out a folder, physical, because apparently dramatic revelations required paper in this family. My father's medical records. I had them reviewed by specialists in Tokyo. Amara's heart jumped. And? There's a procedure. Experimental, but promising. For partial spinal cord injury recovery. He handed her the folder. It won't fix everything. But it might give him back some mobility. Maybe even enough to what? Walk? Talk properly. She flipped through the documents, her nurse's eye scanning technical details. To have a life that's more than just existing. Ji-hoon's voice softened. He asked me to discuss it with you first. Before deciding. Why me? Because you're the one who's kept him alive for 5 years. You're the one who knows what he can handle. He paused. And because he trusts you. More than anyone. Amara sat down, the weight of the folder heavy in her hands. The procedure was risky, any surgery was, especially for someone in Dae-jung's condition. But the potential benefits. What does he want? She asked. He wants to try. But only if you think he can survive it. She thought about the stubborn man who'd glared at her through 5 years of indignities. The proud crime lord reduced to needing help with everything from eating to breathing. The father who'd called his son home because he wanted to see him one more time before dying. He can survive it, she said finally. But it's going to be hell. The recovery period, the physical therapy, the pain. He's survived worse. True. She closed the folder. When? 3 months. That gives us time to prepare, to stabilize his condition, Ji-hoon stopped himself. To make sure everything's in place. Everything meaning what? Meaning the organization. The family business. His expression turned careful. I'm taking over. Officially. Amara processed this. And by taking over you mean? Restructuring. Making it legitimate. My father built an empire on fear and violence, but times have changed. The world has changed. Ji-hoon met her eyes. I'm going to transform it into something that won't get my children, if I ever have any, killed or imprisoned. That's ambitious. That's necessary. He pulled up a chair, sitting across from her. And I want you to stay. Through the surgery. Through the recovery. Through, he gestured vaguely. Whatever comes next. Ji-hoon, I'm a nurse. Not a business consultant or a... You're the person my father trusts. The person who saw everything and still stayed. The person who his voice cracked slightly. Who loved him enough to keep him alive when it would have been easier to let him die. Amara's throat tightened. I didn't love him. I was just doing my job. Liar. The word hung between them, soft but accurate. Because he was right. Somewhere between the 1st year and the 5th, between the breathing treatments and the terrible jokes, between watching a proud man struggle with basic dignity and still finding ways to be stubborn about kimchi temperatures, she'd started caring. More than caring. Loving in the complicated way you love someone you've seen at their absolute worst and still choose to show up for. Fine, she admitted. Maybe I care. A little. Don't let it go to your head. Ji-hoon's smile was genuine this time. Too late. A sound from the doorway made them both turn. Dae-jung sat in his wheelchair, pushed by one of the staff members. His eyes moved between them, then fixed on Amara with an intensity that suggested he'd heard everything. Were you eavesdropping? Amara asked. That's very rude, Mr. Kim. I'm adding it to your list of behavioral infractions. 2 blinks. Guilty as charged. And you want my opinion on the surgery? 2 blinks. Yes. Amara stood, moving to kneel in front of his wheelchair so they were eye level. It's risky. The recovery will be brutal. You might not gain as much mobility as you're hoping. And there's always a chance of complications. Dae-jung's expression didn't change. He was listening. But, she continued, I've watched you fight for 5 years. Fight to breathe, fight to move, fight to keep living when it would have been so easy to give up. And I think, her voice caught. I think if anyone can survive this, it's the stubborn old man who's made my life difficult for half a decade. His good hand moved slowly, reaching for hers. She took it, feeling the tremor in his fingers, weakness and strength existing in the same gesture. So yes, she said. I think you should do it. And I'll be there. Through all of it. Even the parts where you're cranky about hospital food and refusing to do your post-op exercises. 1 blink. No promises. Yes, promises. Or I'm confiscating your pudding privileges. Dae-jung's mouth twitched the closest he could get to a laugh these days. Ji-hoon cleared his throat, and Amara realized he was watching them with an expression that was equal parts grateful and envious. Missing the years he could have had. Regretting the pride that had kept him away. Come here, she told him. What? Come here. Your father wants to tell you something. Ji-hoon moved closer, uncertain. Dae-jung's hand released Amara's and reached for his son's. When Ji-hoon took it, Dae-jung pulled him down, not far. His strength was limited, but close enough that they were face to face. Then Dae-jung did something Amara had never seen in 5 years. He smiled. Really smiled, the kind that transformed his face from intimidating crime lord to just father. Ji-hoon made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. I know, Aboji. I know. Amara stood, giving them space. She moved to the window, looking out at the garden where nothing grew except expensive imported plants that required constant care, kind of like this family, she thought. Beautiful but high maintenance, requiring someone to tend them or they'd wither. Amara. She turned. Dae-jung was looking at her, and his hand was moving toward the tablet. Ji-hoon helped position it, and Dae-jung's finger moved across the screen with painstaking effort. When he turned it around, The words glowed. Thank you. For everything. For staying. For keeping me alive. For bringing my son home. Amara's vision blurred. You're going to ruin my reputation as a tough nurse if you keep being sentimental. More typing. Raise. Hazard pay. Bonus. She laughed through tears. Damn right. And vacation time. 2 weeks, Lagos, non-negotiable. My mother wants to meet the man who's been paying for her kidney treatments. Daejung's eyes widened. Ji-hoon looked confused. Oh, Amara said, did I not mention? The obscenely generous salary you've been paying me for 5 years? Half of it has been going to medical treatments for my mother back home. Kidney disease. She needed a transplant. She wiped her eyes. She got one, by the way. 6 months ago. Doing great. But she's been very curious about my employer who pays well enough to cover international medical care. Bring her here. Amara blinked. What? After surgery. Bring your mother. Family should be together. Mr. Kim, you can't just invite random Nigerians to your crime lord estate. Not random. Your family. My family. Same thing now. And there it was. The thing neither of them had said in 5 years. That somewhere between the medical crises and the terrible jokes, between the breathing treatments and the stubborn pride, they'd become family. The found kind. The chosen kind. The kind that didn't require blood, just presence. You're going to make me cry again, Amara warned. Stop being emotionally available. It's confusing. Dae-young made his kettle sound, the one that meant he was laughing at her. Ji-hoon watched the exchange with something like wonder. How do you do that? He asked. Understand him so well? 5 years of practice. Also, I'm very smart and observant. Amara grinned. And he's not as complicated as he pretends to be. Take away the crime lord exterior, and he's just a dad who misses his son and has opinions about pudding. I heard that, Dae-young would have said if he could speak. Instead, he settled for aggressive eye-rolling. You were meant to. Amara moved back to his chair, adjusting his position. Now, it's almost time for your afternoon medication, and then we need to discuss the surgery prep timeline. Dr. Nakamura sent over a preliminary schedule that requires. Her phone buzzed, then buzzed again, then started ringing with the insistence of someone who wasn't going to stop until she answered. One moment, she said, checking the screen. Unknown number. She answered warily. Hello. Miss Amara Okonkwo? A voice, professional, speaking English with a British accent. Yes. This is Claudia Hartwell from Royal London Hospital. I'm calling regarding your application for the Advanced Cardiac Nursing Program. Amara's heart stopped. She'd applied for that program years ago, before taking this job, before meeting Dae-young, before her life had become a Korean drama written by someone with a vendetta against normal workdays. Yes. We'd like to offer you a position. The program starts in 3 months. We understand it's short notice, but one of our accepted candidates had to withdraw, and your application was next in line. We were impressed by your experience and recommendations. 3 months. The same timeline as Dae-jung's surgery. Amara looked at him, at Ji-hoon, at the family she'd accidentally built in this house of expensive marble and complicated loyalties. Can I think about it? She asked. Of course. We'll need an answer within 2 weeks. She hung up, and both men were staring at her. What was that? Ji-hoon asked. A job offer. In London. Advanced Cardiac Nursing Program. Very prestigious. Very, she stopped. Very far from here. Dae-young's expression shifted through several emotions before settling on something that looked like resignation mixed with pride. Don't, Amara said. Don't look at me like that. He typed slowly. You should go. Opportunity. Career. And leave you right before major surgery? Have you met me? I'm stubborn and overly committed to my patients. Not patient. Family. Family wants you to succeed. Ji-hoon cleared his throat. He's right. This is Amara, this is huge. You can't pass this up because of... Because of what? A job? A person I've cared for 5 years? A family that somehow became mine. She shook her head. I have 2 weeks to decide. Let's get through the surgery prep first. Then I'll think about London. But she already knew the answer. Had known it the moment Dae-jung typed those words. Family wants you to succeed. Because that's what family did. They showed up. They stayed. They fought for each other's happiness even when it meant letting go. 2 weeks later, Amara sat in Daejung's room with her phone in hand and her mother on FaceTime. "You're sure?" her mother asked in Igbo, her face pixelated, but her concern crystal clear. "I'm sure, Mama. The London program. We'll be there next year. Or the year after." Amara glanced at Daejung, who was pretending to sleep, but definitely listening. "Right now, I'm needed here. For the surgery. For the family." Her mother's expression softened with understanding. "You love him. This old Korean man." "Mama. Don't mama me. I know love when I see it. Maybe not romantic love, but family love. The kind that matters just as much." She smiled. "You stay. Do the surgery. Help him heal. Then you can visit with your family." "My family? This Mr. Kim and his son. I want to meet them. Anyone who's been paying for my kidney treatments deserves my jollof rice." Amara laughed, and Daejung's eyes opened, busted. "She wants to make you jollof rice," Amara told him. "You're about to understand why I'm food motivated." 2 enthusiastic blinks. After she hung up, Ji-hoon appeared in the doorway. "So? London. Next year. Maybe. If you all haven't driven me crazy by then." His relief was visible. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. The surgery is in 6 weeks and the prep work is going to be intense. You're both going to hate me by the end of it." "Impossible," Ji-hoon said. Daejung made an agreeable grunt. "Liars. Both of you." But Amara was smiling. "Now get out. Your father needs his rest, and I need to update his medical charts before Dr. Nakamura's team arrives tomorrow." As Ji-hoon left, he paused at the door. "Amara? For what it's worth, I'm glad you stayed. Not just for my father. For all of us." After he was gone, Amara settled into her chair beside Daejung's bed. Through the window, storm clouds were building again, always dramatic, this weather. But inside, for the first time in 5 years, the house felt peaceful. "You know," she said quietly, "when I answered that ridiculous job posting, I thought I was just signing up for good money and morally ambiguous employers. I didn't expect," she gestured vaguely. "This. Any of this." Daejung's hand found hers. Squeezed weakly. "But I'm glad I did. Answer the posting. Stay. Survive the gunshot and the betrayal and Park pointing a gun at my head." She squeezed back. "Even if you are the most stubborn patient I've ever had." One blink. "No apologies. None expected." She adjusted his blankets. "Now sleep. We've got a long road ahead, and you need your strength." As his breathing evened out into actual sleep, Amara pulled out her notebook, the one where she tracked his daily progress. At the bottom of today's entry, she wrote, "Day 1826. Patient remains stubborn, opinionated, and impossible. Surgery scheduled in 6 weeks. Prognosis: uncertain but hopeful. Family status: complicated but real. Nurse's emotional state: surprisingly content, despite everything. Note to self: ask for raise before surgery. And hazard pay. Definitely hazard pay." She closed the notebook and looked at the man who'd become so much more than a patient. Who'd given her a family when she'd only been looking for a job. Who'd trusted her with his life and, more importantly, with his son's return. Outside, the storm finally broke. Rain hammered against the windows like bullets, appropriate, Amara thought, for a house built on bloodshed but learning, slowly, to be built on something else. Something like love. The found kind. The chosen kind. The kind that survived gunshots and betrayals and 5 years of aggressive eye contact. The best kind of all. The end.